Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's Daily Devotional. So before we get started for today's Daily Devotional, I do want to clarify something I said yesterday. Obviously, when we talked a little bit about submission to government in 1 Peter chapter 2, starting in verse 13, and how that later Peter goes on to describe some what's expected of servants to their masters and so forth as Christians. And obviously, we made some application with regard to employees and employers, but obviously it's not an apples to apples comparison. There are some major differences between masters and servants of that time versus employers and employees of our time. One of the primary ones being that we do have a choice, whereas the individuals of the New Testament who were considered servants or bondservants, they, for the most part, didn't have a choice in that. Either they were indentured servants paying off a debt, or they were enslaved servants. Either way, they didn't have much of a choice if they were in that state. And so, obviously, as employees, we can choose to no longer work for an employer if we don't like how things are going, whether it's because they're doing something that we believe is sinful or immoral, or they've enacted some rule or law that we believe is against God's word, or not. Okay, we can still choose to quit. We have that freedom. We have that choice. So I do want to make that clear. It's still, I think, the characteristics that both Paul and Peter, as well as other writers of the New Testament, describe with regard to the employee-employer, or the master and servant relationship, obviously still apply, as opposed to when you start talking about the context of having the Christian character, of obeying those masters in that position, of being of not pilfering, but adorning the gospel of Christ, as Paul would tell Timothy. So obviously those characteristics are still required; those are still necessary. But obviously we do have more freedom of choice, at least right now, in our society and in our current age, than servants did with their masters in the New Testament. So I do want to make that clear. I was reviewing my the daily devotional last night, and I was thinking it in my head, but I didn't actually explain that. So I wanted to make sure I made that clear, that we're not trapped, so to speak, or stuck in that state as the situation may have been in the New Testament. All right, so moving on to today's daily devotional. There's an article, and I even mentioned this, I think, on Sundays, in Sunday's sermon, maybe? I don't remember. Maybe it was our class. I think it was actually our class. But we've talked on several occasions about how more and more there are articles and information coming out about scientists who are rejecting the Big Bang Theory. And the title of this article, this was posted about a week ago or so: "Surprise, the Big Bang isn't the beginning of the universe anymore." We used to think the Big Bang meant the universe began from a singularity. Nearly 100 years later, we're not so sure. So when it describes a singularity, it describes, we've talked about just this ball of energy, this ball of incredibly condensed mass and energy and heat and so forth, and then it just blew up. And in the split second, and in the half a blink of an eye, everything kind of started forming. And what we're going to look at is, obviously that's not how they think about it anymore. Now, this article is fairly technical in some areas, so we're going to skip a lot of the technical things, and it kind of builds the base to get to the explanation, and so we're going to skip a lot of that too. But it says the Big Bang teaches us that our expanding, cooling universe used to be younger, denser, and hotter in the past. However, extrapolating all the way back to a singularity leads to predictions that disagree with what we observe. Instead, cosmic inflation preceded and set up the Big Bang, changing our cosmic origin story forever. Where did all this come from? In every direction we care to observe, we find stars, galaxy, clouds of gas and dust, tenuous plasma, radiation spanning the gamut of wavelengths. Talks a little bit about what all we observe, and yet it's only natural to assume that it all came from somewhere. Yes, it is. If you want to know the answer to the biggest question of all, the question of our cosmic origins, you have to pose the question to the universe itself and listen to what it tells you. Now, that's, I guess, one way to look at it, or you could pose the question to God and let Him answer it as He has already. Today, the universe as we see it is expanding, rarefying, meaning it's getting less dense, and cooling. In fact, these are all points that Doy talks about in the book that we're covering on Sunday mornings, Mind Your Faith, and in fact, in the chapter that we just covered. Although it's tempting to simply extrapolate forward in time, when things will be even larger, less dense, and cooler, the laws of physics allow us to extrapolate backward just as easily. So the question is, how far back can we go? All the way to the beginning is kind of the point. This idea of a singular beginning to space, time, and the universe was long known as the Big Bang. But physically, when we looked closely enough, we found that the universe told a different story. Here's how we know the Big Bang isn't the beginning of the universe anymore. Like most stories in science, the origin of the Big Bang has its roots in both theoretical and experimental observational realms. Okay, so he talks about this for a little while. He talks about observations, talks about laws that were concluded based on experimentation. Then in the 1920s, Edwin Hubble began measuring individual stars in these nebulae and eventually determined the distances to them. Not only were they much further away than anything else in the galaxy, but the ones at the greater distances are moving away faster than the closer ones. They swiftly figured out the universe was expanding. Again, obviously, in order for it to be expanding, it must have had a beginning. This individual, I'm not going to try to pronounce his name. I'll butcher first, 1997, I assume it's French, Lemaitre, I don't know. To recognize this, upon discovering the expansion, he extrapolated backward, theorizing, as any competent mathematician might, that you could go as far back as you wanted, to what he called the primeval atom. In the beginning, he realized the universe was a hot, dense, and rapidly expanding collection of matter and radiation. Everything around us emerged from this primordial state. And so then, based on that, there are some additional predictions. The universe is more evolved than it was in the past. The further back we look, the further back in time we look. And at some point, the radiation was so hot that certain atoms couldn't form. Eventually, things cooled off so that things could form. In conjunction with the expanding universe, these 4 points would become the cornerstone of the Big Bang. The growth and evolution of the large-scale structure of the universe, of individual galaxies, and of the stellar populations found within those galaxies all validates the Big Bang's predictions. But wait, something happens. But extrapolating beyond the limits of your measurable evidence is dangerous, albeit tempting game to play. After all, if we can trace the hot Big Bang back to some 13.8 billion years, all the way to when the universe was less than 1 second old, what's the harm in going all the way back just 1 additional second, to the singularity predicted to exist when the universe was 0 seconds old? So this is where basically it says that's dangerous, because we don't really have a lot of evidence for what things were. So there's just wild speculation is what it boils down to. For example, if the universe began from a singularity, it must have sprung into existence with exactly the right balance of stuff in it, matter and energy combined, to precisely balance the expansion rate. If there were just a tiny bit more matter, the initially expanding universe would have already collapsed by now. If there was a tiny bit less, things would have expanded so quickly that the universe would be much larger than it is today. I think that's a really interesting point, because it's similar to the evidence of fine-tuning that we talked about on Sunday, associated with the teleological argument, and the as well as, I think, the actual mention of the evidence of fine-tuning is in the universe, the design. I can't remember the name of it. Anyway, there was a designer at the beginning. It's similar to the teleological argument, but it's the third point that he makes. It'll come to me here in just a minute, and I'll blurt it out. So I thought that was a really interesting point. And yet, instead, what we're observing is that the universe's initial expansion rate and the total amount of matter and energy within it balance as perfectly as we can measure. Why? Why is that? Well, they've got to find an answer. They've got to figure that out, right? If the Big Bang began from a singularity, we have no explanation. We simply have to assert the universe was born this way, or as physicists ignorant of Lady Gaga called it, initial conditions. Similarly, a universe that reached arbitrarily high temperatures would be expected to possess leftover high-energy relics. We don't observe any. The universe would be expected to be different temperatures and regions that are casually disconnected from one another, yet the universe is observed to have equal temperatures everywhere to 99.99% precision. Sounds amazing, doesn't it? Continue going, talk some more detail, some more technical stuff. Inflation accomplishes this by postulating a period prior to the hot Big Bang where the universe was dominated by a large cosmological constant, or something that behaves similarly. In other words, there was a set series of laws that existed even before the Big Bang. This phase stretches the universe flat, gives it the same properties everywhere, gets rid of any pre-existing high-energy relics, and prevents us from generating new ones by capping the maximum temperature reached after inflation ends and the hot Big Bang ensues. Furthermore, by assuming there were quantum fluctuations generated and stretched across the universe during inflation, it makes new predictions for what types of imperfections the universe would begin with. In essence, it's describing a design that was set into effect even before the Big Bang. We'll see where we're going with this. Intelligent design. See, I told you I was going to remember what it was supposed to be. The intelligent design theory. That's what I was trying to remember. Since it was hypothesized back in the 1980s, inflation has been tested in a variety of ways against the alternative, a universe that began from a singularity. When we stack up the scorecard, we find the following. And I love if you're wondering why we're reading some of this stuff, it's because it's building up to the conclusion. And I love the conclusion from the perspective of what they're building to here. Inflation produces all of the successes of the hot Big Bang. There's nothing that the hot Big Bang accounts for that inflation can't also account for. Inflation offers successful explanations for the puzzles that we simply have to say initial conditions for in the hot Big Bang. And of the predictions where inflation and a hot Big Bang without inflation differ, 4 of them have been tested to sufficient precision to discriminate between the two. On those 4 fronts, inflation is 4 for 4, while the hot Big Bang is 0 for 4. But things get really interesting if we look back at our idea of the beginning. Whereas a universe with matter and or radiation, what we can get with the hot Big Bang, can always be extrapolated back to a singularity, an inflationary universe cannot. Due to its exponential nature, even if you run the clock back an infinite amount of time, space will only approach infinitesimal sizes and infinite temperatures and densities. It will never reach it. This means, rather than inevitably leading to a singularity, inflation absolutely cannot get you to one by itself. The idea that the universe began from a singularity, and that's what the Big Bang was, needed to be jettisoned the moment we recognized that an inflationary phase preceded the hot, dense, and matter and radiation-filled one we inhabit today. They're not saying that there wasn't an explosion of matter and heat and energy. They're saying that something existed before that. Now, notice what this conclusion is. Here's your conclusions. This new picture gives us 3 important pieces of information about the beginning of the universe that run counter to the traditional story that most of us learned. Well, I learned a very different traditional story, but he's talking about the Big Bang. First, the original notion of the hot Big Bang, where the universe emerged from an infinitely hot, dense, and small singularity, and has been expanding and cooling, full of matter and radiation ever since, is incorrect. The picture is still largely correct, but there's a cutoff to how far back in time we can extrapolate it. Second, observations have well established the state that occurred prior to the hot Big Bang, cosmic inflation. Before the hot Big Bang, the early universe underwent a phase of exponential growth, where any pre-existing components to the universe were literally inflated away. When inflation ended, the universe reheated to a high, but not arbitrarily high, temperature, giving us the hot, dense, and expanding universe that grew into what we inhabit today. Lastly, and perhaps most importantly, here's your underlying component. We can no longer speak with any sort of knowledge or confidence as to how or even whether the universe itself began. By the very nature of inflation, it wipes out any information that came before the final few moments, where it ended and gave rise to our hot Big Bang. Inflation could have gone on for an eternity. It could have been preceded by some other non-singular phase, or it could have been preceded by a phase that did emerge from a singularity. Until the day comes where we discover how to extract more information from the universe than presently seems possible, we have no choice but to face our ignorance. The Big Bang still happened a very long time ago, but it wasn't the beginning we once supposed it to be. Now, I want you to think about what's being said here, okay? One of the, well, other than obviously the scientific holes of the Big Bang Theory, one of the conundrums, logical conundrums, that Dewey himself brought out in the chapter that we were covering Sunday was that everything had to have a beginning. Everything that exists, everything that is contingent on something else has a beginning. Which is to say that the universe had to begin. And in fact, Dewey brought up the fact that the universe is expanding, the universe is cooling. All of these things that show that at one time it must have started. Well, the Big Bang Theory, obviously, the proponents of the Big Bang Theory had a major problem. Because even if you go all the way back to that singularity, well, where did that singularity come from? Did it exist eternally and all of a sudden some switch got flipped and all of a sudden it blew up? Did somebody create that little ball of energy? I mean, how did it get there? What happened? Notice what the end result is of this new theory. So now they have this period of cosmic inflation taking place before the Big Bang. Okay? Now, again, they're not sure whether that little ball of energy existed prior to or during or after the cosmic inflation. But what they're saying is that before the little thing went boom, there was this huge inflation. And somehow through the course of this cosmic inflation, like blowing up a balloon, certain laws were placed into effect. There was a certain cap on how hot could get. So that when the little ball went boom, then you had certain rules in effect that would then regulate the expansion of the universe and the energy involved and the heat involved and everything else. But here's the kicker to it. Not only does the cosmic inflation solve that little conundrum, the scientific observation conundrum, but now we have an answer to people who ask, well, how did everything start? Obviously, everything had to have a beginning, right? Well, we can no longer speak with any sort of knowledge or confidence as to how or even whether the universe itself began. By the nature of inflation, it wipes out information that came before. There is no way for us to know how things began or if it began. And this is the beauty of this argument, is it completely eliminates, or at least seemingly eliminates, the perhaps biggest logical conundrum that the Big Bang Theory faced. Well, how did the Big Bang start? Well, now you have a period of time, however long it may have been, where the universe, there was this expansion. Of course, you can ask the question, well, how did it expand? Scientifically, there's no answer. And that's the beauty of their argument, is that until we can learn how to extrapolate stuff from the universe that presently seems possible, we have no choice but to face our ignorance. It wasn't the beginning. There may not have ever been a beginning for the universe. It could have just been an eternal cosmic inflation. But then there was a Big Bang. Of course, you can still ask, okay, well, where'd the Big Bang come from? Where'd the little ball of energy come from? I mean, it's still susceptible to some logical holes. But this is kind of a means of dealing with some of those issues and to scientifically be able to say, we don't know. But saying we don't know doesn't diminish or kind of count against the scientists. Instead, we don't know is the only scientific conclusion there is, because there's no way to know. There's no scientific way to know, at least until we develop some better technology to be able to answer it all. We don't have an answer scientifically. It's not just Well, we don't know because our theory doesn't make sense. Now it's our theory makes sense, and the universe refuses to tell us. And so I think it's ironic and somewhat comical that is the conclusion that has been drawn. And again, this article's, it goes into some technical stuff, but what does God's word say? Okay, I think that's really what we're here for. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void. Darkness was on the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. God said, "Let there be light." There was light. God saw the light. It was good. He divided the light from the darkness, and God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. So the evening and the morning were the first day. Then he created land and the firmament in the midst of the waters. Let it divide the waters from the waters. Thus God made the firmament, divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. It was so. Then he called the firmament heaven. So the evening and the morning were the second day. And so it continues to describe dry land and so forth. Now, going into chapter 2, thus the heavens and the earth and all the host of them were finished. On the seventh day, God ended his work. Into chapter 3, we talk about the serpent and Adam and Eve and the tree and so forth. Now, all that being the case, we know that God created all things. What existed before all things? We don't know. Okay? The way Moses describes this in verse 2, these are terms I imagine we probably can't fully understand. The earth was without form and void. There was no mass, it doesn't sound like. Okay? There was nothing there. And then God created all things, not only the earth and the sun, but the universe itself is all contained here in this creation. The firmament he called heaven. Okay, notice it says here in verse, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, let it divide the waters from the waters. Thus God made the firmament, divided the waters which were under the firmament he called heaven." Not like literal heaven, as in the spiritual realm, but heaven as in the sky, and perhaps even going further than the sky, space itself. There are some terms here I would imagine we probably couldn't understand being described in the creation of the universe. But the fact is, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. In John chapter 1, we know Jesus was there. John chapter 1 and... go back to... there we go. "In the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him nothing was made that was made." This is also brought up in Colossians when Paul talks about Jesus being the firstborn of creation. He was there. So, you look at this article and you look at all the extrapolation that it takes, all the testing, all the money spent, and that's to be expected. All of this to try to come up with a theory that ultimately basically says we don't really know how it started. It's not possible for us to know. When God's word says, yeah, you can know. And no, it wasn't that God created the cosmic inflation and the little ball and then kind of flipped the switch and let the universe kind of create itself over 13.8 billion years. God created all things. He created all things as they were. So he created a universe that was 13.8 billion years old. He created the universe already in the midst of expanding. He created everything as it is. Cosmic background radiation. God created that too. God created everything that's there to be observed. He created it. Well, why would he do that? Wouldn't that be deceptive to create something looking as though it's been around for 13.8 billion years? Well, what are we told by Paul? And for that matter, even instances in the book of Ecclesiastes and Proverbs about the wisdom of God and how that God has created the simple to confound the wise, and of course, in particular, that's being applied to the gospel. But the wisdom of God is such that those who have faith, none of this is going to change that. It's not that we don't believe that what they're observing is true. I believe the universe is expanding. I believe that it probably scientifically does look like it's 13.8 billion years old. I've got no problem with any of that. But I have an explanation that doesn't require going off a cliff to try to figure out exactly how to explain it all, ultimately only to end up with, well, we can't really explain it because the universe is being tight-lipped about it and it won't tell us. Well, God created everything. And he created it to be as it is, with laws, with rules in place, far better than simply basing on faith that some cosmic inflation period took place and then somehow arbitrarily set laws in motion before the Big Bang ever happened that would limit or cap the amount of heat that could happen, that could be involved in the creation of things. On what are you basing that? What possible quantum physics can you use to explain how that works? It's as if this universe is designed specifically for Earth to exist. Imagine that. Anyway, that's the daily devotional for you today. I saw that article and it fit perfectly with the stuff that we've been talking about lately. And I said, you know what? I think that would be an interesting point to bring up because people are still being taught about the Big Bang. And there's a million articles out there describing, no, the Big Bang wasn't the beginning, but we're really not sure what is. And here's this article saying, well, we do know now, but not really, because in the end, the answer just leads us back to more questions that can't be answered by its very nature. All right, that's the daily devotional for you today. Lord willing, we'll pick up with the next daily devotional on Thursday at 6:30, hopefully, Lord willing. I hope to see you all then. Thanks, everybody.